Welcome to the Entrepreneur Stories podcast. Jonathan Herps is your host. He is a strategic advisor, coach, and mentor to entrepreneurial founders, business owners, and CEOs. In this podcast, he chats with entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies.
Hi there, it's Jonathan Herps here. Welcome back to my podcast, Entrepreneur Stories of Scaling Up. This episode is number 106. Today I'm talking with Gary Smith, who's CEO and founder of B Radio Network. Hi, Gary. Welcome to the call.
Oh, good morning, Jonathan, and thanks for inviting me.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. So I'm coughing a bit. I've just told Gary we're in Barrel and it's 6 degrees. So listen, why don't you tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey so far and also about your company?
Yeah, sure. So it started really by accident, which is probably how a lot of businesses ultimately start out, or people in business do. My background was big end of town corporate. So I was a director of American Express. I ran one of their divisions in Australia. Had a lot of experience in travel, working for both Jet Set in the good old days. And when my boys were young, my wife enrolled them in rugby at our local rugby club. And I was a little bit slow in getting off the field after dropping them one morning for training. And one of the guys said, hey, Gary, you look like you could be a team manager. And I thought, caught. I've
been that, and I've been the coach for the kids rugby team now for 6 years.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And so we lived in a fairly good area in Wahroonga in Sydney's upper North Shore. But the club itself, when I looked at it, they were really existing almost hand to mouth. They had to wait till they got their registration fees in to be able to buy new jerseys and things like that. And I thought, well, this is crazy. If I'm going to be involved with the club, I'll volunteer and go on the committee and I'll see if I can help them with sponsorship. And I thought, all I'll do is I'll just treat this like a normal business. So I went on the committee, and what I was able to do over the time I was on the committee was build a club into probably the financially strongest junior rugby club in the country. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars upgrading the facilities. We put lights on the oval. And then other clubs contacted me and said, can you do the same for us? And I said, sure, but I'll charge you for it. And they said, yeah, that's all right. And I thought, could be a business here. So I started to build that up, and I ended up in a fairly short time with 50 clubs and 100,000 members. And I thought, this is really a media network. What I'm doing is I'm connecting businesses who want to advertise and reach communities with their audiences on pretty well a hyper-local level. And I thought, this is great. Who am I going to get who's going to really want to reach these audiences? So I started approaching the really big companies, the telecommunications providers and that, and I typically got the same response, and that was great, love it, it's fantastic. But 50 clubs, 100,000 members, when you're a little bit bigger, come back and talk to us. So I thought, well, if we're going to be serious about this, we're going to have to grow the network and build it up into something fairly substantial. I spoke to the current clubs and I said, guys, we might have to forego revenue for a little bit while we develop the network to be big enough to be appealing. And so over the ensuing years, I built it from 50 clubs to 6,000 clubs, from 100,000 members to 4 million members.
Wow. And
instantly we became very much in demand. We ended up being a major sponsor by default of a lot of clubs, where I think we were on the jerseys of about 20,000 players across the country as a major sponsor, with a naming sponsor of some competitions. And that was going well. We continued to grow. We got to 8,000 clubs, 7 million members. And then COVID hit. And that wiped everything out. Community sports stopped. Local businesses that typically supported community sport, they were shut down, so they didn't have any money. Major crisis, for us, for business, for the clubs, for our audiences. In the middle of COVID, a lady who was working with us, who had a background in media as a journalist, as a TV presenter, told me about independent community radio stations. And I thought, they sound just like our sporting clubs. run by volunteers. Some are really good at getting sponsorship revenue. Most are not very good at it, but they all typically miss out on the revenue from major companies and governments because those big organisations can deal with the major commercial networks because it's one point of contact, but they can't deal with hundreds of individual radio stations. So we had learnt an awful lot about volunteer not-for-profit organisations through our sport involvement. And I thought, let's apply that same learning to radio stations. So that was just over 18 months ago. We've now got 121 radio stations across Australia that are part of our network. That gives us an audience approaching 4 million people, which I believe makes us the largest radio station network in the Southern Hemisphere. And we will grow that to about 200 stations by the end of this year. But what we're also doing is we're going back to our roots, and that is most of these radio stations cover local community sport. They do outside broadcasts. They do updates on the games and that. So we're able to actually now start supporting sport. And by working with businesses, because everyone understands radio, they may not understand direct marketing to community sport, but they understand radio. So by bringing the two together, we've created a real hyper-local marketing platform that in communities we can reach people at every individual touch point. So that's really our journey. We're now in the process of integrating, or in discussions, I should say, with bringing on board a network of local newspapers as well. So it's all about, in the local community, it's about supporting local communities, bringing major companies and government to the point where they can reach individual consumers and influence their purchasing decisions. And we're financially supporting local communities at the same time.
Fabulous.
So it's been an exciting journey.
It has. So, yeah, being an active member of the Barrow Rugby Club, the Barrow Blacks, yeah, if you're not in connection, please let me know, and I'll put you there.
Done. Let's do it. Because we do have a radio station in Barrow as well.
Of course, that's right.
Of course.
And it's a really interesting point you make, though. I'm sorry, I did mention that we might go down some rabbit holes, but
Sure.
It was a really. Local sport, I've got 2 9-year-olds, so we're actively involved, netball, rugby,
Yep.
OzTag, you name it. And it's fascinating. Our rugby club here has been very successful at raising money.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much as I'd like, but they got a grant of $990,000 from the state government a couple of years ago.
Wow.
And the reason being was, it's interesting, a very similar story to you. The president down here, a guy called Mark Freund, really good local community guy.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a farm manager. Now runs a local co-op. Realised his limitations, and as president of the club, went out and found someone very, very well connected, great businessman, and said to him, "I want you to raise money. Here's what I want the money for." Yeah. And Gary Avis, the guy he lynched onto the committee, said, "Well, I need a budget." It's exactly the same story you've been talking about. And Gary paid a grant writer and briefed a grant writer, and they were very, very successful. Downside for the other clubs is there's quite a bit of envy running around, because it's the only club that's been able to do that. So I can see a real benefit in what you do.
It's all about making communities, whether it's sport, whether it's radio stations, sustainable long term. And part of it, like community radio, I prefer to call it independent radio, because community radio tends to give a bit of an incorrect perception. But if you rely on grants, which a lot of them do, you've got a very limited future, because if you can't appeal to the givers of grants, whether that's large corporations or primarily government, and if there are changes to the economy, you're in big trouble. So you've got to you've got to spread your risk, I guess, as far as revenue goes, and put yourself in a much more sustainable position. And that's really what we do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so much for the large corporate background.
Yeah. So, and look, it's been an absolute, it's been a delight. It's been a big learning curve for me, and we're going back now. This is, the best part of 20 years I've been doing this, but in big corporations, especially if you're a senior executive, you need something done, you send it out, it goes through the door, comes back done.
Yeah.
In small business, if you want it done, you do it yourself. You get on the computer, you type the the emails and the letters, and
I know the feeling.
yes, you become very hands-on, but you learn a lot at the same time.
Exactly right. So listen, and you've got an interesting perspective of this because you've been on large corporates and small businesses. But if you had to start from scratch, are there any aspects of your personal leadership and leadership development you'd prioritise more?
Yes, I would. There's probably the two main areas that I think you go in with a bit of naivety. One is the importance of managing cash flow and accounting, really important. Again, in big corporations, you have whole departments that do that. It just happens. You get your reports and everything. In small business, you typically start the week by saying, how am I going to get enough money in this week to pay people at the end of the week? Yeah, really, that's your focus. First part is make sure you've got all of that right. The second part is the people you bring on board. It's really easy to look at people who've got similar styles to you, or you might like the person, but you really need to look at and focus on what value add are they going to bring to the business, and are their values aligned with yours? So they're probably the two biggest learnings for me.
Yeah, and they're both so important. It's and I talk about. In fact, I wrote a blog yesterday, which is coming out next week, about what the CEO does. Three things. One is set the strategy and communicate the strategy incessantly. Secondly is getting the right people on the bus doing the right things, and thirdly, having enough cash to pay for it all.
Yeah.
And if the CEO or the leader gets those three right, it will lead to success.
Yeah, and they're the foundations. If you get that set in place, then you can build on it. But if you've got foundations of sand, you're in trouble.
That's right.
Yeah.
So tell me, going a bit deeper on employees, what qualities do you look for, and how do you foster a positive culture within the business?
Yeah, so some of the things that I look for, it's they've got to have a skill set, or at least a desire for that. In our business, they've got to have a focus on community and on supporting community, because that's what we're all about. They've got to be honest. Honesty for me is probably the absolute priority. It's don't try to be politic. Don't try to be say what you think you want or people might want to hear. Be straight. Be completely open, transparent. And I guess one of the things that I would add in is moral. And when I say moral, it means you've got a moral commitment to do the right thing. No corner cutting, no trying to negatively impact people who you're going to be dealing with. So for me, they're the real fundamentals. If you've got those right, you can build everything else around it. But you've got to have that basis. Again, it's the foundations, like we spoke about, with with cash flow management, with accounting and those things. They're your foundations.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So something I work with my clients a lot on is we don't necessarily need someone who's an A player in productivity in the role, because we can actually train people. But it's living the corporate values, and espousing those corporate values are the critical part.
Yes, yeah.
What do you think has been your biggest learning since you've become a business owner?
Oh, my biggest learning. Well, for me, it's actually been learning about community, volunteer, not-for-profit organisations. Really, a massive development and understanding of what drives loyalty, consumer loyalty, community loyalty to businesses, and that's doing the right thing by people. It's about engaging with them. It's understanding that it's got to be an everybody wins, and if it isn't an everybody wins, then you've got a fairly limited future, I think. I know from my perspective, some of those values are that what I do is, an example I use is every day when I shave in the morning, I want to feel comfortable with the person I'm looking at. And that's a basis. So whatever I do, for me as a learning, it's got to be about, do I feel good in what I'm doing? And I've worked in companies where you think, oh, geez, I wouldn't do that. In the very old days, I used to work in consumer finance. I was very young. I'd have to describe those days as being cowboys. And, I often, almost wake up in the middle of the night thinking, did we really do that sort of stuff? So
you and I have a bit of a similar background. I worked for a company called GMAC.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, I worked for Avco and Household.
Right. And, used to repossess cars. I was a baby-faced 20-year-old.
Yes, same.
Running around late at night, followed by a tow truck repossessing cars.
Yep. Yeah, terrible stuff. Yeah, terrible.
Yes. I remember a manager saying to me, here's a word you need to use, Jonathan. Ring them up and say, if you don't want to hear the rattle of tow truck chains in the middle of the night, pay up now. It's like,
you could never do it now.
No, that's right.
And I remember one story in the very early days. The supervisor and the vice president had gone around to a person's house who was way overdue, and they're going to repossess their TV. And so the supervisor went and he knocked on the door and he's talking to the guy about the account being overdue. And the guy heard this noise and he ran into his other room, and the VP had climbed in the window, had the TV, was trying to climb out the window, but forgot to unplug it.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. You go to jail these days if you even thought about doing that. That's
right. So tell me, what do you reckon are the main challenges for your business right now and moving forward?
Oh, for us, the status quo of the major global players is the biggest challenge. So for us to be really successful in radio, and also it leaks into community sport, we need to work with the major corporations. The major corporations invariably deal with the major media buyers, and the major media buyers have got long-term locked-in agreements with the networks that they've built long relationships with. Really hard to change that structure. That's the biggest challenge, and that's the one that's probably the anchor that's slowing us down as we grow. We are really good at building networks. In 18 months to go from an idea to the biggest radio station network in the Southern Hemisphere, it's not a bad effort, I think, and that's people like the lady who put me onto it in the first place. We've really good people who really understand it and are dedicated and focused on achieving that. But the problem with the media networks or the media buyers is they're set in their ways, they're structured, they're part of a global group, and how do we change that dynamic? And that's the biggest challenge. I think it's going to take time, years rather than months. I like to think in terms of weeks and months. I think they look at terms of years, but determination, step by step.
Yep. And perseverance.
And perseverance.
Yeah.
And beat the drum about yourself a little bit. The more the market knows about who we are, the higher the probability that then the companies themselves will be saying to their media buyers, have you included the B Radio network? Yep. And if not, why not?
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So tell me, when you think of the word successful, who comes to mind and why?
Yeah, there's two that really stand out for me. One is Jeff Bezos, and the other is Richard Branson. And why they both stand out for me is almost against all odds, determination. I read recently about Jeff Bezos starting Amazon in his garage and struggling. I think, it took 6 years or 7 years before he actually made a profit in any 1 year. And in the last year of that, I think he lost $2 billion in that year alone. That's, you've got to have nerves of steel to go through that, and to keep the direction, to stay motivated, to stay focused. So that determination, knowing you're on the path of the right product, but being determined to see it through. Richard Branson, similar. His story, struggle, how he managed to, start the record stores by convincing people to let him have some space so he could then sell records, which gave him enough money, and the same determination, knowing that it was the right business to be in, doggedly staying there, but not foolishly. So I think it reinforced the fact that if you're going to start a business and you want to be successful, it's going to be really hard. It is going to be a major challenge. You are a gambler. There's no ifs or buts about that. You're a gambler if you go into business, and you're making a bet based on your best estimates, and then you've got to be determined to see it through.
Yeah. No, two really good ones, and well and truly up on my admiration list. I've actually I've studied Jeff Bezos a little bit, and I wrote a blog just recently about his decision-making style.
Right.
He talks about one-way door and two-way door decisions. Because, you get to a stage, and you'd remember this from corporates, you get to a stage where you can't make every decision. And if you try, you're going to burn yourself out.
Yes.
And secondly, if you try and make every decision, no one below you can build that decision-making muscle, and therefore the business won't grow.
Yep, exactly.
And his theory is one-way door, two-way door decisions. Yeah. It's a one-way door decision is something that is really important, that is very, very difficult, that will change the function, like going to radio from that decision. That's a one-way door decision that could be catastrophic if you don't get right, and therefore he makes those. Everything else, more routine, he pushes down, and he credits that as one of the major reasons that Amazon's been so successful, that he's taught people how to make decisions.
Yeah, empower people.
Yeah,
within a framework. Don't leave it just willy-nilly for people to do what they want. But
that's right.
Yeah, and develop your people.
Of course. No, that's exactly right. So tell me, are you a reader, listen to podcasts, anything you would recommend to entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, the one, again, that started me off, Richard Branson's Like a Virgin. Mm-hmm. Great read for me. It was tremendous. I learned a lot from that, the determination, seizing opportunities, making the most of it. I also read a book that just gave me an insight into the things you can do really badly, and it was called Westpac, the Bank That Broke the Bank, and that was a really interesting book about how making the wrong decisions and a little bit of arrogance almost wiped out the oldest bank in the country.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I had someone I was following yesterday was making a comment about I was actually, sorry, not someone I was following, it was actually one of my clients, saying she learned more from the mistakes she's made. That's one of those interesting things. Those that make more mistakes and learn from them are they're the ones that will be more successful.
Yeah, and you will make mistakes.
That's right.
No ifs or buts. If you don't, you're not pushing the boundaries enough.
Agreed. So last question. Any last piece of advice or parting words to business owners out there who are looking to grow?
Yeah, seize the opportunity, but also work with the people who are with you, who've got the ideas. For example, the lady who worked with us, Marguerite, who was the one who had a background in media, television, radio. 2 years ago, I didn't know that community radio existed. I'd never heard of it. She knew about it. She told me about it. She could explain it. For me, I was a bit of an opportunist, and I thought I could see the link between community sport, the similarities, and radio, but it was her deep understanding. So it's about working with the people who work with you, seeing opportunities, and then collectively, it was a joint decision in both of those that we decided, yes, let's go down that path, let's test it. We struggled. In fact, the industry bodies who I first approached and we told them this is what we're planning on doing, they said, great, tell us all about it, which I did, and then they'd never talk to me again. So and that's when we decided, well, let's just go and do it ourselves. So, but it was only because we had some really good people who were determined, who had the vision, who had the understanding. So the people who you've already selected, that you're already working with, they can be a wealth of knowledge and experience. And if you work collaboratively with them, you can learn a lot from them, which will help you grow.
Great advice. Great advice. Gary, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
No, my pleasure too. And as always, there are little nuggets in your answers that great learnings for other entrepreneurs. So I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. And I look forward to coming down to Bowral to help the rugby club.
Please do. Love to introduce you around.
Sounds great.
Cheers, Gary.
All right, good on you. Thank you. Bye.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you watch/listen. It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the learning gets. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in entrepreneur stories of scaling up. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to admin@scaleupgrowth.co. Put "Be a guest" in the subject line and tell me a little about yourself. If you want to gauge where your business growth potential is and identify where the biggest opportunities in your business lie, or where the key needs that you need to concentrate on right now are, take our assessment where you will receive personalized advice for improvement. It's quick and free. Go to scaleupgrowth.scoreapp.com. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, I love coaching and get the best outcomes that way. Send me an email at jonathan@scaleupgrowth.co and put one-to-one in the heading. Tell me a bit about your business and let's see how we can apply a great strategy for your business. So that's it for this week. Tune in next time for more great learnings from a scaling entrepreneur.